Hi everyone, Michelle Hips here, Director of Environmental Education at the new Canaan Nature Center. And today we're going to talk about something that can be found in your backyard, in your house, and pretty much anywhere on Earth. Typically growing in warm, moist places, on trees, on their bark, on their branches, on their roots, even on tree stumps. It's been a little cool so far to find any growing really well in my backyard, but give it a couple of weeks. Spring and usually fall are the best times of year to see these guys growing. Here's another example of some growing on a tree branch. It can even be found in the most unlikely of places, like in between the cracks of your deck steps. Did you guess what it is yet? That's right, it's Fungus among us! As we learn all about fungi today, we hope you will enjoy mini segment appearances from a very special guest speaker who will introduce himself now.
Hi, my name is Taro Ietaka. I'm the past president of COMA, the Connecticut Westchester Mycological Association, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about mushrooms and their relatives today.
Fungi come in all shapes, sizes, colors, and textures. You never know what you're going to discover. Fungi can also be mushrooms, molds, yeasts, and so much more. The varieties are seemingly endless. In fact, there are over 100,000 known species of fungi on the planet today, and scientists are discovering more and more every year. Now you may be asking yourself, why should I care about fungi? Our next mini segment will highlight one pretty cool fungi and hopefully give you a better idea of why these unusual organisms are so important.
This mushroom is called the violet tooth polypore, and it's one of our most common decomposers. It gets its name because when it's fresh, if you look under the cap, you can see it's got a beautiful violet purple color. Plays an important role in breaking down dead and dying matter, wood especially. Fungi are one of the few organisms on the planet that can break down wood. Without fungus, we'd have stacks of leaves and branches and logs head high or above.
To truly understand fungi, we first need to take a step back for a second. Fungi are living things, and all living things play an important role in their environment. And they can be classified into 3 broad categories based on how they obtain their food. Can you guess what those 3 categories might be? If you said producers, consumers, and decomposers, you are correct. Producers are any green plants that have the ability to make their own food through the process of photosynthesis. Producers have chlorophyll, a green pigment that absorbs sunlight. During photosynthesis, sunlight, carbon dioxide, and water combine inside the chloroplast cells to produce food, which is called glucose, a type of sugar. That is what the plant eats. Oxygen and water are also created. Consumers are organisms that cannot perform photosynthesis and therefore cannot produce their own food. Instead, they must ingest their nutrients by eating other organisms. There are 4 main types of consumers: herbivores, which are animals that only eat plants; carnivores, which are animals that only eat other animals; omnivores, like us, that eat both plants and animals; and something you may have never heard of before. They're called detritivores, organisms that eat dead or decaying materials. They help to recycle nutrients just like decomposers, and in fact, some people even categorize them as decomposers. But we will classify them as consumers because they do actually have to eat the animal or decaying matter, unlike decomposers. Unlike detritivores, decomposers don't actually eat their food. Instead, they are organisms such as fungi and bacteria that break down dead organic material to recycle vital nutrients back into the environment in forms that other organisms can easily use. Together, producers, consumers, and decomposers help to form food chains and food webs. In the example here, primary consumer, a cricket, is eating the grass that is making its own food thanks to the sun. That cricket is then eaten by a mouse, who is then in turn eaten by a snake, who is then in turn eaten by a hawk. Eventually, when that hawk dies, its body will be decomposed and all of that energy will be cycled back into the earth to be used by producers all over again, and the cycle can continue. What do you think would happen if one of these roles was removed from the food web? Let's for instance say that we took out the decomposers. Without decomposers, carbon, nitrogen, and other elements would accumulate in organic waste, aka dead plants and animals, and would no longer be available as raw material for new generations of life. In forests, leaves, logs, feces, and dead animals would pile up on the forest floors. Plants would wither because elements taken from the soil would not be returned, and the soil would not have enough nutrients. The food chain would be broken, and the forest would not be able to live. Decomposition rates vary depending on several factors. For instance, in the wild, decomposition typically sees items with more protein break down more quickly. That means that dead animals will break down much more quickly than tree leaves. Composting at home? Fruits and vegetables decompose quickly, while items such as bread and meat take more time as they have less water and more fibers in them. Non-food items such as plastic bottles, aluminum, and candy wrappers are not placed into vermiculture boxes or compost bins because they take a long time to decompose. Now that we understand why fungi are so important, let's examine them a little more closely. For instance, did you know? For many years, scientists have attempted to classify all living things. Classification means separating into groups based on characteristics. In 1969, all living things were classified into 5 separate kingdoms for the first time. Those groups are Monera, Protista, Fungi, Plantae, and Animalia. For the first time, fungi were given their own category. Before this, fungi were often lumped together with plants, because many have different parts that resemble the different parts of plants. We'll discuss this more later. However, fungi lack chlorophyll, so similar to animals, they cannot make their own food. Instead, they obtain their food in several different ways. 1. Decomposition, which we have already discussed. 2. Mutualistic relationships. This is where 2 different species benefit from relying on one another. So for example, a fungus may live on a tree's roots. The fungus provides the trees with increased nutrient absorption capabilities, while the tree provides the fungus with sugars produced through photosynthesis. The third way that fungi obtain their food is through parasitic relationships. This is where a fungus obtains its nutrients by living off of a host species, such as a plant or animal, causing harm or even death to the host. In this next segment, learn more about the different ways fungi obtain nutrients by taking a good look at lichen.
This is toadskin lichen. So lichens are a relative of mushrooms. They're a kind of fungus, but where most fungi get their food from either breaking down dead matter or parasitizing living matter or partnering with trees and plants, lichens do it a little different. It's a fungus that has an algae living inside of it. So the algae creates sugar with sunshine, and the fungus kind of extracts it from the algae, and in return it gives it a safe place to live. So there's some debate whether lichens are kind of like a parasite on the algae. Some people, or one botanist said that lichens, or the fungus in the lichen, is a cruel tyrant and the algae are the captive peasants. Other people see it more as a partnership and collaboration with both sides benefiting.
Even though they have many shared characteristics, such as how they obtain their food, fungi are truly unique. Here are a few examples of fungi that can be found right here in Connecticut. Commonly known as spotted court, This gilled mushroom is known for its slimy purple caps that develop yellowish spots and streaks in maturity. It has a delicate gill pattern underneath its cap, as shown in the photo. Often called two-colored bolete, after its two-toned color scheme of red and yellow, this edible pore fungus inhabits most of eastern North America, but can also be found in China. Check out the pore pattern underneath its cap. This shelf fungus is called turkey tail because it looks similar to, you guessed it, a turkey's tail. It can be found from spring to late fall, living on dead deciduous and coniferous trees. Can you guess the name of this fungus? It's called upright coral fungus because it resembles clumps of coral. Most grow on decomposing logs and stumps, but some inhabit living root systems. Commonly called hairy rubber cup, this fungus has cup-shaped fruiting bodies which grow in clusters on branches. Although considered inedible in North America, they are commonly consumed in Malaysia. Finally, check out this giant puffball. Giant puffballs can be found in meadows, fields, and forests from late summer into autumn. Unlike most mushrooms, its spores are created inside of its fruiting body. How cool is that? Now that we've seen some examples of local fungi, I'm wondering, how do they grow? In the diagram shown here, you will see the three main parts of a typical mushroom. Let's start with the spores. Mushrooms begin with a tiny dust-sized spore, which may land on the ground, a log, a tree, or even dead animal. Ideal growing conditions are warm, moist spots. The spores are similar to a plant's seed. Up next is the hyphae. Once in the right spot, this network of hair-like fibers begins to grow. All hyphae together are called mycelium. Its job is to decompose the host to feed the fungus. This is kind of similar to a plant's roots. Finally, we have the fruiting body. This is the part of the fungus that we can see. When conditions are right, again, it's warm and moist, a fruiting body will grow. Its job is to produce and spread new spores, similar to how plants produce new seeds. In this next segment, learn more about a mushroom's life cycle by taking a look at a real fungus.
Here we have something that looks like a classic stem and cap mushroom. Fungi can live for decades or even 100 years or more in some cases, but we only see the mushroom for a short time each year. So what happens to it? Well, the answer is that the mushroom is really just the reproductive structure. It produces spores that make more mushrooms, but the vast bulk of the fungus is actually called mycelium, and you'll just see a little bit that white thread-like stuff at the base of the mushroom. That is all underground and can spread for tens or hundreds of feet, absorbing nutrients from its environment. So the structure of the mushroom in all mushrooms is to get the spores out into the wider world. So the stem raises the cap, which has the spores, so that the spores, when they fall, will catch a gust of wind and blow far away. Other mushrooms have different strategies, but that's one of the most common.
So what did we learn today? Fungi are an integral part of every food chain because they recycle nutrients back into the environment. Indeed, many forest ecosystems would collapse without fungi to decompose dead organisms, fall leaves, feces, and other organic matter. They are such a distinctive form of life that they have even been placed into their own kingdom. The many different types of fungi are amazing to learn about and search for when you go for a walk in the woods. They will literally grow anywhere that is warm and moist. This means that you have the ability to find fungus almost anytime you venture outside. We hope you enjoyed today's video and that you take the time to discover nature's magical recyclers the next time you are exploring the great outdoors.